And really very warm welcome to all of you who found time on a Friday morning to be here. The weather has changed for the better. It is officially the onset of spring because, as you know, from here we'll have Basant Panchami about 5 days from now. And Basant Panchami is also the festival for learning. I am very pleased to be here on the occasion of the third EDUConvex. And I think at this stage I should set the tone for what are we trying to do, why are we doing this, and what do we expect to happen in the future. Because EDUConvex is now an annual event. This is a season for conferences in India, and especially educational conferences. For the last couple of weeks, there is a conference, I think, every day, every other day. And in fact, I've been present in many of them. And as we speak here, there is something happening in Claridge's. Next Monday, something else is happening. So there are conferences and conferences on education. It's of course very interesting because education has now received a kind of an attention in India and the rest of the world that it almost never had before. And the drivers for this are basically a few things: the globalization of the world, the emergence of the knowledge economy, the movement towards what is being called a learning society, and the fact that every nation in the world sees its future progress linked to the skills and knowledge that its citizens have or are able to draw upon. So this is something which is very fundamental and interesting, and I'm emphasizing this because this event by design, unlike many of the other educational events, we've not invited any minister or politician or peer bureaucrat to be part of this, because we want to build on solutions. We are not talking rhetoric, we are not talking platitudes, we are not talking plausibilities. We actually are looking for a call for action. And this is interesting because Margaret Mead, an anthropologist who's famous for her books, said that never discount the potential of the effort of a few committed men for change. There's a few committed people for change. In fact, all major changes have happened because of a few committed people. Elissa Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics for 2009, she is of course the first lady to have won the Nobel Prize in Economics. Her research showed that for many things which are owned by the community, the best way of management is by the community itself. It's very interesting, and it's a sharp contrast to the view which was propagated by many of the other economists. And there's a very famous book called The Tragedy of the Commons, where they said whatever is a common resource will actually get disused, out of use, misused, and will perish. And the only way to salvage that is either the government takes over or there is privatization. And therefore, for the last few decades, the world over, all such stuff is either taken over by government, as acquired by government, or given to private corporates, or the more interesting word, public-private partnership. And this is why Elinor Ostrom's work, although it is fundamental and has won the Nobel Prize, is not talked about much. The corporates don't want to talk about it. The government doesn't want to talk about it. And she actually visited India. I was present when she gave a talk at Vijay. None of the important people came there. It's only Jairam Ramesh, Minister of Forest, who came, because we always only see that forest things and tribal living as a thing of common resource. We never look at education as a common resource. Although the Creative Commons model of education as opposed to the intellectual property model of education is being considered and is very important, we often looked upon governments controlling education. And we have a very important saying from Henry Maine, who wrote somewhere in 1861, that as a society evolves, it moves from status to contract. And our educational model primarily so far has been an authority-driven model where various authorities in a sense control education, regulate education. And they do so in a manner which is very interesting because the All India Council for Technical Education, and we all talk about technical education as being very critical, actually had on its website that no innovative method of education will be permitted. The CBSE, as we said, has officially banned use of mobiles in schools, even for teachers. Teachers get distracted and so on and so forth. While being distracted by mobiles may be bad, but the mobile is a digital device which in everybody's hands actually overcomes the digital divide that we talk. So anyway, why I am saying this is because I want to give a larger picture to what we are doing. And the larger picture to what we are doing is we are trying to see what are the new ways of education in the future. And one of the important things about new ways in education in the future is that moving away from a very local kind of a perspective where you prided on being educated at a particular place, we are now moving towards a global participation in the education process. If you look at industry, how industry has evolved, let's talk about the automobile, which is one of the high impact industries. Of course, first automobiles were made by hand and they were all hand manufactured. Of course, top end Porsches were still hand manufactured. But then Henry Ford created an automated model of creating automobiles. But at that time, when we talked about a Henry Ford model of automobile, the model of factory was that Ford owned the fields in England on which grazed the sheep from whose wool was made the seat cover of the cars. Now that's the kind of integration people talked about. So if you are a car manufacturing company, you make everything that goes into making of a car. Today, it's no longer so. Today, cars are made by any number of companies. They source things from their competitors sometimes. And there are car making companies which don't even make engines. They take some very good engine made and use it. The difference between Honda and Hyundai basically is that Honda does all the research, Hyundai simply buys the outcome of the research and makes effective, useful cars. If you go to the pharmaceutical industry, we've had a similar thing. And some of us are old enough, if you remember when you went to your doctor as a young person, the doctor would have a compounder sitting over there and he would have red, yellow, green colored medicines and he will give you some medicine and you will drink that medicine and so on. Today, doctor no longer stocks medicines. Doctor stores his knowledge. You go to the doctor, first of course checks whether you have an appointment or not and whether you are covered by insurance or not. If you are covered by insurance, he treats you with a little greater respect. And then of course he proceeds to talk to you about what your story is. You tell the stories, he prescribes you a series of tests to undergo and he prescribes you a series of medicines in the interim. Doesn't keep anything himself. What has happened? A specialized industry of diagnostics has got created, a specialized industry of pharmaceuticals has got created, and the doctor's role is to do the diagnosis, prescribe the intervention, monitor your progress, and get you to good health or recovery or whatever your goal was. Why I am building upon all this is to try to tell you how these apparently different looking organizations are all getting connected together in the kind of endeavor we are talking of. You've seen and you know that in various parts of the world, the ruler laid down the law, he applied the law, he gave the punishment, he held the trial, everything was done by the same authority until Montesquieu proposed a separation of the powers. So what we have in India is a separation of the judicial power, the legislative power and the executive power. And you see every day that this balance is what helps us move and make progress. I think we are going to get into a similar thing for education. The people who are standards providers, who say what's a qualification, what's a meaningful qualification, how do qualifications map to each other, will be one set of people and the SQA represents that. And that's why we have somebody from the SQA because we are talking about, it's very interesting. If you look at India, we have any number of tests. All tests are discrete and they have no correlation with each other. So if you do a certain test, there are 400 universities or whatever, and if you've done something from some university, there is no simple mapping of that thing against some other university. It's a broad statement of Association of Indian Universities that all degrees are recognized on a mutually reciprocal basis. But that doesn't say anything about what a person has actually achieved or learned or done during the qualification. So, we've been talking about a national qualification framework for some time. We don't have it, and therefore we might as well use an international qualification framework because that helps us grow. So if you will, the internet is an international framework which we all adopt. We didn't wait for internet to be approved by the government of India, etc. We said if it works, if HTML works for us, if web works for us, if Wi-Fi works for us, we start using it. So that's one part. The other part is the content. Now people who create content can be quite different from people who assess. And this can be a large number of institutions who will be content providers, much like the pharmaceutical industry that we have. Assessments would be a different thing. And therefore, we can have people whose specialized role is to assess things for various competencies or evidence or whatever. So when you say that somebody has done something, you can expect. Today what happens is that when you have, let's say, a BA in any subject, BA in English or maths, there is no guarantee given by anybody that a BA person with a BA or BSc in mathematics can actually find the roots of a cubic equation for you. And you can do nothing about it. He has a degree, he's got it in the convocation. Unlike industry, where the movement of quality moved in a certain way, that eventually the original, originally the model of sales was something which in law and Latin is called caveat emptor. Caveat emptor means buyer beware. So before you buy anything, you look at everything, see and see it is fit for use. And if you got sort of, cheated or your expectations were something else but they were not met, there was no remedy. It's caveat emptor. Then came in this quality thing, etc., quality assurance, warranties, replacement warranties. Now we talk about Six Sigma, and that's how the products and services have moved. Now everybody talks about products and services of quality, and quality actually means this. In education, do we have that? I mean, if you had a BSc in mathematics who could not solve the roots of a cubic equation for you, would you go back to the vice chancellor and say, please take this person back? He can't do what we expected from him and repair him and send me, or give me a substitute who can actually do the work, etc. No. Why? Because they go by authority.